1. Unlike a lot of stories here, I don't have any evidence, and most of the situations happen months, even years apart, so I have no idea if they are really connected or not. I'd love to know what you guys think might be going on, because I'm starting to feel slightly crazy. My first weird encounter happened when I was in elementary school. I can't remember what grade specifically, but I was definitely young. My older brother, Jay, and I invited our neighbors Mike and Pay over for a Friday sleepover. My parents ended up hitting the hay earlier, around 9 p.m., so the four of us decided to take advantage of the mainly unoccupied house and play a good old game of hide-and-seek in the dark. For reference, I used to live in a one-story house that was built in the 70s, so the windows were really low and easy to look through if you tried to. My window in my bedroom was positioned on the side of the house, diagonal from a pesky streetlight that always seemed to perfectly shine into my window every single night. I didn't own curtains, but I did have blinds in my window, and I always kept them shut to try and block out some of the light. Anyway, it was Mike's turn to count. My brother Jay, Pay, and I all decide to hide. I end up shoving myself into the crowded, messy closet, which had one of those big folding doors. Because of the fact that my closet had 1,000,001 things in it, and I didn't fit very well, the door wasn't able to fully shut. At the time, I didn't really mind though, because it gave me a little slit between the door that I could peek through. 1 minute turned into 5. Then everyone eventually got found, aside from me. Mike was starting to grow impatient and asked Jay and Pay to help him find me. That's when Pay, like the genius she is, ended up flinging my closet door open with an accomplished grin on her face. I don't remember much other than me complaining that she was cheating before my eyes drifted past her head and toward my bedroom window behind her. I remember my blood ran cold, the silhouette of a man with a hand literally cupped to the window, as if he was trying to peek in. It was enough to scare the ever-loving crap out of me. I screamed a blood-curdling scream, which only caused Pay to turn on her heels to try to see what had me so frightened. It took all but 3 mere seconds before her screams joined mine, and we both gripped onto each other and full-on sprinted into the living room. I nearly stumbled over my older brother's hands while my parents raced out of the bedroom. I ended up explaining to them through choked tears that there was a man outside my window. My older brother and stepdad grabbed a flashlight, a knife, and checked every perimeter outside. They even went as far as checking our surrounding neighbors' backyards and down the street. There was nothing, nobody, literally dead quiet. And just to add as a side note, I remember very clearly that it was pouring rain that night. So it would be incredibly hard for anyone to escape quickly without leaving sunken footsteps in the mud, and without the sound of heavy shoes splashing against wet earth. Fast forward many, many years. At this point, I'm 19 years old, and I end up moving in with my girlfriend and her family. Just to add in, I know it typically doesn't mean much, but the feeling of being watched, always having unknown company hovering behind me, has been a feeling that I've felt for over a decade now. Sometimes I feel like it's all just in my head and I'm psyching myself out, but other times, the feeling just feels so damn real. Like I can't shake it. Like my body is trying to alert me that I'm not alone. And the more I ignore my body and its warnings, the louder it screams. Anyway, I'm 19 now, living with my girlfriend and her family. One night I decided that I absolutely needed a midnight snack, and my girlfriend had already been knocked out asleep along with her younger brother and parents. I went downstairs, clutching onto the collar of her American bulldog, because just like so many times before, I felt the unease of not being alone. For reference, to get to the kitchen, you have to come eye to eye with their sliding glass door that leads to their backyard. I am 100% certain that night that the door was shut and locked. 10,000% certain of it. I end up making myself a PB&J when a shiver literally wrecks through me. I ignore it, of course, and finish making my sandwich and clean up the mess I made before turning around to head back upstairs. I end up turning just to stare at the half-open sliding glass door. I obviously immediately jumped into, oh my god, there's a human in the house right now. So I ran over to the door and shut it and locked it before checking out the entire downstairs. There wasn't a single soul other than me and the dog. I can't really explain how that happened. Even to this day, it fills me with a sense of unease. When I woke up the next morning, I asked my girlfriend's parents if they could have forgotten to lock the door. They stared at me with confused looks before reassuring me that they always double-check that all doors are locked each night. The next situation happened a few months later. My girlfriend and I decided to take a weekend trip back to my hometown to visit some friends and family. Basically, we joined one friend at a bonfire that was being hosted at her grandmother's house. To quickly explain it, her grandmother lived on a pretty big plot of land in the middle of nowhere, where the only things surrounding her are back roads, a cornfield, and a thick bundle of trees lining her backyard. My girlfriend wanted to be silly and decided to leave the bonfire and sprint a little over 150 feet away to lay on her back a few feet from the lining of the trees. My friend and I just ended up staring at her, waiting for her to pull one of her stupid jokes, when a blood-curdling and utterly bone-chilling scream erupted from the forest. I've never seen my girlfriend get up and run towards us so fast a day in my life. When she got back to us, she was shaking like a leaf with eyes wider than the moon itself. I've been with my girlfriend for 4 years and have never known her to be a liar. And she swore on specific things that she loved that there was something that screamed at me just a few feet away in the trees. She said she didn't see anyone or hear anything. It was dead silent when all of a sudden, the scream ripped through the air. The scream ripped through the air. It sounded so terrifying that it even unnerved my friend's parents and grandma. The third situation happened not too long ago. My girlfriend ended up having to work a 24 at the fire station, so it was just me, the little brother, and the parents at home. Just like last time, my grumbling stomach kept me from being able to fall asleep. So, with a sigh of defeat, I got up and went downstairs to grab food. When I came back up, I was fiddling with trying to lock the puppy gate at the top of the stairs, when I heard a deep, gravelly whisper, someone whispering my name, all drawn out. I jumped out of my skin and quickly set my plate of food on the ground so that I could pull my phone's flashlight up and shine it toward the other end of the hallway. Again, surprise, surprise, there was nobody. I was completely alone in a dead silent hallway, so there was zero chance of me mistaking the noise to be a TV or something, as there were no TVs or no noise whatsoever. I ended up peeking my head into her parents' room and her little brother's room. They were all sound asleep, drool and all. I ended up texting my girlfriend about it that night because I was completely just freaked out. When I woke up the next morning, I read that she had texted me freaking out at 6 a.m. because she was changing in the girls' bathroom at the fire station when she heard a whisper. And she explained it to sound exactly like how mine did, that said hi to her, all drawn out like. I can't explain what that even means or what it could be, but it's safe to say that I'm never going to get midnight snacks alone again. This final thing happened just a week ago. I didn't experience it myself, my girlfriend did. We were downstairs in the middle of the day talking to her mom. The hallway that has the bottom and front door is connected to the kitchen, so if you stand in the middle of the kitchen, you can see perfectly down in. My girlfriend randomly lurched forward into the hallway and smacked the wall right next to the bathroom door. I turned around and gave her a confused look because there was nobody there. I watched as she peeked her head in the bathroom, looking like she's expecting someone to be there, when she quickly ducks back out and hurried back toward me. She explained that she turned around and saw the quick motion of a white sleeve arm moving into the bathroom, as if her little brother quickly ducked into the bathroom to try and hide and scare her. And she ended up catching his sleeve in the action. Yet her little brother was at school and her father was in the living room with us. There was absolutely nobody else in the house other than us four. I have no idea if all these are linked in some way, if there has been something that's been following me since I was a child. I'm not sure. I've never seen any figures myself, except for the face at the window when I was younger. What do you guys think? 2. The following is a text review that I posted on the Museum of Shadows Facebook page. Cheers. We went to the Museum of Shadows in Omaha yesterday. It's just an old creepy building with a bunch of supposedly haunted artifacts. We paid an extra $10 for an EMF reader. It lights up red whenever it detects electromagnetic frequencies, and it beeps faster and faster when a frequency is super strong. It would spike a little bit around certain dolls, but nothing amazing at first. However, it went absolutely nuts on a particularly creepy clown picture. It was so consistent that we suspected there had to be a junction box or something behind the wall. We were able to confirm that was the case later in the Sit Challenge room. Anyways, we tried to identify the source by going down the basement. Sure enough, there was a ton of thick conduit underneath where we were standing on the first floor. So we wrote off the creepy clown picture as a fun museum prank. But as we were waving the EMF reader around, this wooden display cabinet started lighting up the reader. The cabinet was in front of a brick wall, and there didn't appear to be any electrical wiring or anything around it. In fact, there were hardly any lights at all down there, except for the red lights at the other end of the basement in an area called the Demon Room. The EMF reader eventually localized in a single doll in this cabinet called Roberta. She was in the darkest corner of the basement, and you had to crouch down to even see her. The reader would go crazy only when we were looking at her and shining a flashlight in her eyes. As soon as you looked away, the reader would stop beeping and flashing. Whenever the reader calmed down, we could ask her questions, and it would respond with single beeps on the reader as if to say yes to whatever we were asking it. But every time we shined a flashlight in her eyes, the reader would go crazy again. The card said that a 10-year-old girl was attached to the doll, so we got the impression that she just wanted love and attention. We wouldn't have even noticed her if we weren't trying to get to the bottom of the clown picture. We said goodbye and looked at other stuff in the basement. Before we left the basement, we went back and played with her some more, but it was less intense. We went back upstairs so my mom and sister-in-law could do a 10-minute sit challenge in a creepy room. While we waited, my brother and I went back down to Roberta, but the reader wasn't going off like it did before. But as soon as we said goodbye, the reader spiked a final time. It was an absolutely wild experience. Hopefully the museum can move Roberta to the first floor so she can get the attention she seemed to crave. What do y'all think this was? 3. I used to live in Riverside, California. My mom, grandma, and myself lived in a blue house that was located in a fairly low-income neighborhood that was surrounded by dirt roads, ranches, and tightly condensed homes. Just to try and paint a picture. In my room, upon entering my door, to your immediate left would be my bed against a wall vertically touching that corner of the room. My room had all carpet flooring, and every other night around 11 to 2 a.m., I would hear someone begin to walk from my door along my side of the bed, and end where my head was. They would never pick up their feet, so it would sound as if someone was dragging their feet across the carpet the entire way through, where every time I would move, the dragging would immediately stop and begin back from my door and make its way towards me in the same path and manner. Some nights the air from my steady stationary fan, one of those normal circular ones that did have the capacity to rotate, would abruptly stop as if someone was standing in front blocking it. I would never be able to rationally come to the conclusion as to how that would even be possible, considering the fan was stationary, and the air had been hitting me just fine prior to it being blocked for approximately 8 seconds at a time. I finally told my grandmother and mom what I had been experiencing a few years after the fact, and they confessed to me that one night when I had been sleeping over at my Uncle Ben's, and it was just 2 of them, they had been eating dinner in the kitchen when they both heard someone opening and shutting my drawers from top to bottom. They both thought someone had broken in through the window, and was one by one going through my doors trying to gather as much as they could. When they finally had the courage to get up and check, they opened my door and found everything intact. No intruder, no mess, no drawers left open, nothing. They admitted they didn't want to tell me out of fear of scaring me, which at that point They didn't know I'd been woken up by hearing someone drag their feet across my carpet every other night at 1 in the morning. My grandmother also came toward me and told me that while my mother was at work and I was at school, one day she had gone to the kitchen to get some fruit when she looked down the hallway and saw a tall, solid black figure walk right into my mom's room. She said this was the darkest black she had ever seen, and that figure was so tall that it had to duck its head under the doorframe to comfortably walk in. She said she immediately rushed to her room, locked the door behind her, and waited anxiously for us to get home. She even waited to use the restroom, she was so terrified of walking out of her room. The last thing we all experienced, different times throughout our time staying there, was the doorbell randomly going off every few months. The problem was that the doorbell did not work as the house button was non-existent, with the wiring coming out from the hole where the button should be, which is a cliché out of a horror movie. This is the only one where I can possibly think a more rational explanation can be thought of, but given the context of what went on in this house, it's difficult to chalk up possible faulty wiring. I understand there are skeptics and people listening to this who may not believe me, which is understandable. I am someone who has always thought things through rationally, i.e. a footstep on the hardwood floor can be the wood expanding through the varying temperature, etc. But there are genuinely some things that I cannot explain, nor can I be able to sit there and think of a reasonable explanation as to why this or that happened. And that small blue house in Riverside is a testament to this. I haven't thought about this in years, and the only reason why it came flooding back to my memories was because my 2-year-old son began screaming bloody murder as I held him while brushing his teeth. He had been staring at something in the corner of the ceiling of my bathroom that wasn't there, but I can tell something was there staring back at him just by the way he was frozen, looking up at that corner. 4. I visited a house this week for work. Here in England, most of our houses are built in the late Victorian to early 20th century period, but sometimes older houses are still standing. Occasionally, I'll see an 18th century house, and once I did a job on a remote island in the English Channel where the farmhouses had parts which dated from the late 17th century. I've been doing my job for a long time, and this week I was scheduled to inspect the oldest house I've ever worked on, built in the 1500s. The owner is there to let me in, and after a quick chat she leaves me to get on with my job. The house is vacant, and no one has lived there for a few years or so. Lovely bright sunshine, and in the middle of a hot afternoon, I start to look around the ground floor and small basement. The house is detached on a big plot, but there are other houses and people around, and this is a nice suburban neighborhood that I'm very familiar with. I go upstairs and try to get into the loft, in the end, deciding that the floors are too uneven for my ladder, and that I don't want to move the owner's furniture in order to get up there. So far, no spookiness. Bear in mind that I'm in empty houses all the time, and almost never feel anything weird. I'm not one of these people who thinks that they can commune with the dead or anything. Open the curtains and open the windows of most haunted houses, and the scare factor is removed. Anyway, after about 40 minutes, I'm nearly ready to go, and I've finished my job, before I realize that I haven't been in the back bedroom yet. There are 5 bedrooms upstairs, and I've only been in 4 of them. I'm not expecting to see anything that I haven't seen in the other rooms, but I really should give a cursory glance over each room to do my job properly. I head back down the hallway and go to the back bedroom. You already know what's coming next. Nothing weird with the decor of the room. It has the same wallpaper and carpet as the rest of the house, same little timber-framed window, and a single bed. I think so many ghost stories rely on rooms full of spiders, coffins, or spooky kids' dolls or whatever, but this just looks like all the other rooms in the house. On the threshold, I get a strong feeling that I'm not welcome. I don't feel cold, but I'm aware that in this room it isn't a bright summer's day anymore. I scan the room from the doorway, and I'm very aware that I should not enter. I daren't look in the mirror because my intuition tells me that I won't like what I see. I turn and leave back down the corridor, and it's a lovely sunny day again. Tension is lifted. I go back into the garden to say goodbye to the owner, who has been outside the whole time pottering around the garden. We make some small talk about the house, and as I'm trying to politely leave, the owner shouted out of nowhere, cheerfully, and says, "Oh, yes, and we have a ghost, of course." Before she says anything else, I point to the window of the back bedroom and say, "In this room, right?" She laughs and says, "Yes, of course," and then tells me how when she was growing up in that house, that whoever slept in this room would report the ghost of a young woman who would tell them stories in the night. Just a small encounter that I thought some of you might enjoy. 5. I want to preface this story by saying that while I am pretty much agnostic on a good day, and an atheist on a bad day, I am a fan of horror and grew up in a fairly religious environment via a very evangelical Christian high school. So my point of view may be skewed by those influences. However, I do think whatever my fiancé and I witnessed was at the very least an extremely dangerous person. For context, I started college in fall of 2018, going to a university in a somewhat rural area. College itself sits on a large plot of land surrounded by farmland and vineyards, with sections that are forested and have little trails running through them, and a creek that runs through the length of the school property. The college has even had a murder victim dumped in one of the wooded areas on campus, but that's a story for another day. Freshmen were required to live on campus their first year, and one of the benefits of that was that we had unlimited access to the school cafeteria, aka the CAF. The CAF was pretty nice, boasting a salad bar, sandwich station, mini bakery, hot food with different menus daily, and pretty much every fountain drink you can think of. I would get lunch and dinner there with my only friend at the time, who was now my fiancé, and we began to notice this boy who was always at the CAF alone. It wasn't uncommon to see students eating there alone. My school had pretty poor community outreach and school spirit, but something was really off about this kid. First off, he had a very distinct look. This is important because we recognized him multiple times over 3 years. His skin was extremely pale, and he had this waxy, fleshy look to it that I struggle to describe. Like he was made of wax, had red curly hair, a mouth a little too large for his face. But what was the strangest thing about him was his eyes. They were the same color as his hair, that bright red auburn. His iris was almost too big for his eye, and his pupils were always extremely dilated. His eyes had a bulging look, very similar to Mark Zuckerberg, like they were trying to escape his face. It's hard to describe here, but it just had a very unsettling look to him. It just felt like there was something very wrong, like there was nothing inside him. But his appearance wasn't what caught our attention at first. What caught our attention was the amount of food this kid could eat. Of course, having unlimited access to food, some kids went overboard. But this kid was another level. He always had 5 or 6 cups of juice, soda, coffee, and 3 or 4 plates piled with food. Mind you, he was not large or overweight, but would clear every plate and then just sit in his booth alone, staring into space with his headphones in. That was another thing. He always had this blank, vacant expression. Always staring into nothing. Whenever you walked past his booth, you could hear the music from his headphones was on full blast. We began to notice that no matter what time we went to the CAF, whether it be for a late-night snack, breakfast, or a random afternoon craving, he was always there, sitting alone in the ruins of his empty plates. And we weren't the only people who noticed his strange behavior. By second semester, people began approaching him, at first just some girls jokingly saying something to the effect of, "We strive to be on your level," referencing his eating habits, and he just stared at them blankly. People began to ask if he was okay, if he would like to join them, but he always just stared, sometimes with a knowing smile on his face, but would never reply, leaving the students to depart awkwardly. Once I even witnessed one of the cafe attendants telling him he needed to stop spending all his time there. My friend that I always ate with became my boyfriend, and we began to theorize what exactly this kid's deal was. We said maybe mental illness, or maybe he was a competitive eater, or he was trying to bulk up, but his behavior seemed too empty, too neurotic to be explained away by any of these. Our main theory, the one I subscribe to now, did not come till much later. My sophomore year, I opted to live on campus again, and in the middle of my second semester, COVID hit. My school allowed us to remain on campus until the school year was up, and due to some personal reasons of not wanting to go home, I remained in my dorm. And my boyfriend joined me, and we quarantined together. That time was so strange because our campus became an incredibly liminal space, without all the other students. Some others remained with us, but on any given day you could walk the entire campus and not run into another soul. My boyfriend and I started running the woody trails on campus to get exercise. One day we stopped on one of the woody trails to do some burpees. As we did so, the kid from the caf emerged from some trees, not on any trail, just walked out of the woods and started running towards us. This really caught us off guard because we rarely saw anyone, and he just made a beeline for us. Right as he ran up on us, he stopped, just smiled at us knowingly as if we shared some joke. But it was not a nice smile, it was incredibly nasty, sinister even. I don't know if I felt that way because he had scared us, but something was off. We had never spoken to him those times at the caf, but he seemed to recognize us. The other thing that was weird was that he was jacked, way taller and larger than he had ever been freshman year. It wasn't just that he had gained muscle mass, he just seemed like he scaled up, like he had a massive growth spurt, which I suppose is plausible, but it just seemed really off. We were both shaken by the experience and began to joke that he had been eating so much to store up energy so he could level up or something. Then one of us, I forget which, suggested he looked so strange because it was a demon wearing a human skin that was eating so much to build strength for his demonic powers. And that's how he grew so quickly. Like I said, it began as a joke, but the more we discussed it, the more it just seemed to explain not only his odd appearance, but his odd behavior toward other students, the empty look in his eyes. Here's where things went from weird to absolutely terrifying. My boyfriend and I forgot about him and moved out of my dorm into an apartment a few blocks from school, as we were still finishing. And while school was mostly online now, I liked the area. The same creek that ran the length of our school campus ran behind our complex, and as it was still COVID lockdown and we had nothing to do, we would go on long walks up and down the creek. One evening we went for a walk at dusk, and by the time we got to the main road our apartment was on, it was completely dark. It was extremely quiet, and as we walked along the road we saw we were coming up on a man walking very slow and deliberate. My hackles were up immediately, as our apartment is in a seedy area, and there were lots of homeless and unstable people who sometimes hung around the creek. And there was just something about his walk. It was so deliberate and predatory. As we crossed paths with the man, he walked even slower, and in the dim light of street lamps I realized I recognized him as that same kid, that same waxy face and bulging eyes. I also realized that in one hand he held a paper bag with something big and round in it, while the other held a crowbar. Crowbar? He slowed down even more as he passed us, and turned his whole head and smiled at us. This time there was no mistake when I tell you it was the most threatening, sinister smile I have ever seen, and it had that same knowing in it, like he just knew us and we shared some joke. He didn't say anything, just stared at us with his horrible eyes. I don't know if I've just read too many creepypastas or if I'm overthinking things, but I knew on an animalistic level that he wanted to hurt us and wanted us to know he could. After we passed him, we took off running, and when we returned to the apartment, we were both in full-blown panic. Even my boyfriend, who tends to be pretty level-headed and skeptical, wanted to call the police. We did, and as soon as we began to explain the situation, we felt pretty foolish. They asked if he threatened us, and we said not verbally, but we felt threatened. Despite the absurdity of our call, they said they would look into it, because obviously there's not a lot of non-nefarious reasons for him to be walking around at night with a crowbar. But we never heard anything, and we never saw him again. To close this, I just think the whole thing is strange. How this kid kept showing up in our lives over 3 years and always seemed to recognize us. Always seemed to want to let us know he knew us. I think as people we know when there's just something off about a person, when there's nothing going on inside. People have said as much about sociopaths they've had run-ins with. But I want to know what you guys think. Did I encounter the Antichrist leveling up a demon, or a really troubled kid who became a dangerous man? Maybe he was just a depressed kid. But I will hold firm that we were, at the very least, threatened by this guy. That he wanted to hurt us, and that we encountered something or someone evil. What do you think? I did some rudimentary Google searches for police reports in the area for assault with a crowbar, and some other things that might have been related but could not find anything. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 367. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit the like button, and share the video with friends and family. If you'd like to get early access to these videos, you can get that by supporting me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description. You'll also find links there to the Hellfreezer Discord server if you'd like to join us, as well as links to the Hellfreezer merchandise store on Teespring, where it has designs like the ones you're hopefully seeing on screen right now. And if you especially enjoyed today's video, then why not leave a tip? You can do that by clicking on the heart with a $sign underneath. If you choose to do so, thank you kindly, but you don't have to, although it is appreciated. Okay, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is: have you ever had a piece of equipment in your house that you've forgotten to properly maintain for so long that when you finally got around to it, you're kind of stunned as to how well it can work when you give it a little TLC? I mentioned this because recently, the other day there, I'd gotten into bed, and I've always got 2 fans going in my room, but what I consider the best fan, the one I paid the most money for, has a remote as well, so that's the best fan, was not putting out a lot of air. And I was like, that's really, maybe it's just old. Because I'd vacuum down the front and all, and I think I'd wipe the blades off, but I just wasn't doing much. And it was kind of annoying at this point. I thought, you know what, maybe it's just really, really dusty. And I looked and I saw the back, and I was, oh my goodness, it's clogged. So got up out of bed, because I couldn't sleep knowing that it was that bad at that point. So gave everything a good, thorough clean out, all the dust out of it. Put a little oil just in the spindle, very careful where the oil went, and it was a bit sticky when it was oscillating as well, so sprayed a little oil there as well, and it's like a new fan. It really is. It's actually doing its job again. I can feel lots of air coming from it, the way it's meant to work, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around how long has it been since I properly cleaned it? Because obviously I've cleaned it, but I guess maybe the last time or two I did it, I neglected to do the back because I just kind of did it quickly with a vacuum cleaner maybe. And that's the only thing I can think of. But yes, it was a relief to know that it could work properly again, and is indeed working very well, which I'm very happy about, especially as we get into the slightly warmer weather, which I'm happy with. This is quite comfortable weather for me. It's just you want it to be, a little cooler at night when you sleep, especially as I generally enjoy having the fans going anyway. So that's my answer. Why don't you let me know what yours are in a comment below. And before we go, let's have the answer of the day from a previous video. And this was in relation to favorite adaptations. And today's answer comes from M. Lee. I actually have 3 favorite adaptations of the book Jane Eyre that I adore. First is the 1944 black and white version of the film. Second is the 1997 version. And lastly is the 2011 version of the film. I love the book so much, and I feel that each one of these adaptations brings its own flavor to the material, highlighting different moments of the material in the best ways. I've not actually read the book or seen any of the films, but I do have some awareness of the 1997 version. I did know they'd done another one in 2011, and let's be honest, they're probably doing another one as we speak. I wouldn't be surprised. Thank you very much for your answer, M. Lee. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.